Hello, this is Pastor Jeff Short, and you're watching Christian Answers. Today I'm going to be talking about a topic that has been in the news lately. I've seen a number of videos by some Christian broadcasters talking about this topic, and it's the topic of the song Reckless Love. And it's put out by a group out in California called Bethel Music, and they have a number of videos put out performing the song Reckless Love, and it's describing God's love toward us, and they're calling God's love toward us reckless, and that bothers a lot of people. Now, when I first heard the title Reckless Love, I thought, yeah, that doesn't sound right. There's something wrong there. It doesn't seem to fit. That's not how you would describe God's love, as reckless. We don't normally in theology talk about God being reckless in any respect. Reckless usually in our culture has sort of a negative connotation. If someone drives their car recklessly, that means that they're doing so in a haphazard manner, or they're not worrying about, or they're not caring about the results of their driving. They're just driving at top speed, or maybe they're making sharp turns and they're driving a reckless car would be a negative thing. And most of the connotations that we have with the word reckless would be negative. So when you apply the word reckless to God, or even God's love, then yeah, you're going to raise a lot of eyebrows, and people are going to say, what? Because it's normally not a word that is used in connection with God. It's used in connection with people, because people, of course, are fallen human beings. We're not God. God is perfect. God is perfect in His love, perfect in His wisdom, perfect in His knowledge. And so to use the word reckless in any connection with God usually is error. And that's why a lot of people, for example, there's a broadcaster out down south, I believe, maybe Tennessee or North Carolina or Georgia, someplace down there, named Todd Friel, and he has a radio program, and he has covered this topic a couple times, and I've been able to catch his broadcasts. And I only saw maybe about 5 or 10 minute clips where he was talking about reckless love, and he was criticizing the song for attributing a kind of a reckless love to God. And he felt that that was inappropriate, and the words were incorrect, and that people shouldn't even sing this song. Now, I have actually heard the song Reckless Love. I've actually been in a church service where the song was performed and people worshiped to it, and I found no problem worshiping alongside the many people in the church service singing along the words Reckless Love. And the reason I don't have a problem with this song being sung and used in churches and worship, even though there is that word reckless that's connotated negative in our culture, I don't have a problem with this song being sung in worship service for one simple reason. You have to define a word by its context. And if you look in the context of the song, if you look at the actual words of the song, and you actually then understand how the word reckless is being used, it's not being used in a negative sense. It's not being used in the sense that you would say to a reckless driver, or someone who is a reckless mountain climber, or a reckless this or that. It's not a negative connotation in the song. And so in the context of the lyrics of the song, I mean, if you were to read a poem and you were to come across a word that is normally a negative connotation in our culture, but then when you're reading along in the poem, you would find that the word actually is not being used in a negative sense, it's being used in a positive sense. Then you would say, okay, that's fine, because the context determines the word's definition. And that's a basic rule of grammar. The context of a word determines its definition. You don't have a definition and then you import it into the context and see it and say it must be this definition because this is the main dictionary definition of this word. No, the context determines the definition of a word. And so in this song, Reckless Love, the context determines the meaning of the word reckless. And in that context, it does not mean irresponsible. It does not mean unthinking. It does not mean careless, the way we would define reckless without any context. It does not mean any of that. What it means in the song is it's uncalculated. In other words, it talks about the shepherd leaving the 99 sheep and going after the one that strayed away. Now, from a calculating cost-benefit analysis, you might tell the shepherd, well, you can't leave these 99 sheep and go after one. That would be a reckless decision on your part. That would be a reckless choice on your part because you have to think of the 99. You can't leave the 99 and then go after the one because that would be reckless. That would be irresponsible. That would be miscalculation because if you sit down as a shepherd and you draw out a cost-benefit analysis of the decision to leave the 99 and go after that one lost sheep to find it, if you did the cost-benefit analysis and you weighed the cost of going after that one sheep versus the letting that one sheep go and taking care of the 99, you would probably, in a calculation, in a rational calculation, cold, steely logic, you would say, no, you don't go after that lost sheep. Because after all, for the shepherd to go after a lost sheep that he could not find or see right off amidst the other sheep would mean that he would have to risk his own survival. There might have been a wild animal that devoured the sheep that could also devour the shepherd. There might have been a wolf pack, for example, that got that one sheep. So if the shepherd goes after that one sheep alone, then he might himself encounter that wolf pack, or whatever the danger was, or whatever it was that took that one sheep away from the flock, it might also still be present and it would present a danger for the shepherd. So there were a lot of risks that it would take to leave the 99 and go after the one sheep, as the Bible parable describes. And then there, of course, there's also the possibility if you leave the 99 sheep, then one of them will stray away, or two of them, or three of them, or a number of them will wander away. And so even if you retrieve the one sheep from wherever it was, you still would come back and find that you had overall lost more sheep, because now it's not just one, but it could be many sheep that wandered off because you weren't there taking care of them. You were out there traipsing around the countryside, looking in every cave, looking everywhere for this one, and all the time and the energy and the effort that it took to find the one sheep, you might have lost a lot more than the one. So on a cost-benefit analysis, if you were to weigh all of the factors, the logical choice would be, probability would suggest that you not go after that one sheep. The sensible, practical, logical, reasonable choice would be to let that one sheep go and take care of your 99 and consider it a good day because you only lost one sheep instead of all the others. And so that would be the logical, reasonable, responsible thing to do. But of course, in the parable that Jesus gave, the man, the shepherd, didn't do the practical, the reasonable, the logical, the thing a manager might do at a business. He, out of love for that one sheep, went after that one sheep, even at the expense of his possible life or at the expense of loss in some other way. He loved that sheep and wanted to have that sheep back into the fold so much that he was willing, his passion and his love for that sheep was so much that he was willing to even forget about this calculation that, say, a businessman or a cold calculating odds maker in Las Vegas might calculate and say, no, you don't do that. He went against all of that advice, and he went ahead and started looking for the lost sheep. Now that's the sense in which reckless is used in the song Reckless Love. And in that sense, we understand that actually what the song is saying is actually true about God. If you were to look at all of the factors that went into the decision to come and save the human race on the part of God the Son, you might look at it and say, well, it probably wouldn't be worth it from a business standpoint to come to the earth and to suffer all of the ridicule and to be rejected and to suffer physical pain and violence against you and be crucified on the cross and so on and so forth. If you looked at it from simply a business, cold, calculating, rational cost-benefit analysis, you would probably conclude that God should probably just forget about the human race and not worry about them, not invest in them, because they're such rebels, they're such sinners, and it would cost him a lot. In fact, the Father, it cost him the life of his only Son, Jesus Christ, and so the most precious thing in the world to him. So as far as a weighing of the cost and the benefits of that proposition of coming to the earth and saving humanity, it probably didn't make much logical, rational sense to do that. And there might have been some angels, for example, in heaven that would remind the Father, hey, this doesn't seem to be very much of a benefit to you to send your only Son to the earth to save those human beings who hate you and who rebel against you. And so there might have been a conversation between the Lord God and angels, and there might have been advice for him to not send the Son to die for the sin of the world. But instead of just simply looking at it from a cost-benefit analysis, whatever that might be, and we can't do that because we don't have all the factors, we don't know. But the point of the song was that God, his love is reckless in the sense that he is so passionately in love with his children that he's willing to just go after them. And the shepherd who goes after that one lost sheep at the risk of the 99 or the risk of his own life or the risk of causing more of a problem by going after the one than just writing that one off. I think, in other words, the business calculation might be you had 100 sheep and you still have 99. Well, that's still pretty good. So just forget about that one sheep. He's not worth going after because there are all kinds of factors that would say don't go. And I'm sure if the shepherd had a family, had a wife and kids, and this sheep was out there somewhere, the family might even tell him, hey, it's not worth it. We care more about you. You know, don't risk your life. Don't risk your health. Don't risk your other sheep. Just, it's not worth it. You know, you still have 99 out of 100, and that's still 99% of what you started with, you still have. But God, in that same sense, would say, no, I want that one. I care about that one. I love all the sheep, and I'm not willing to write off any of the sheep. And so in that sense, it's reckless of the shepherd to go out after that one. But Jesus told the parable of the sheep, the 100 sheep, and that one went astray, and so the shepherd went after that one, even though that was just one. Even though he had 99% of his sheep still healthy and safe, he was willing to go after that one. That is reckless, in a sense, in one sense of the word reckless. And so when you look at the song, Reckless Love of God, and you begin to say, is this song a legitimate Christian worship song? You have to take into consideration that what it's trying to communicate. And what it's trying to communicate is that God is passionately in love with his children enough that he's willing to do something that may not make complete, logical, rational sense. That in that sense, it's not a responsible, quote, responsible decision to go after that one lost sheep. In fact, it might even be a little bit irresponsible in the sense of the cold, steely, logical business decision to hold back and not take the risk. God did take the risk, and he came and he died for our sins, and he went through all that suffering and died on the cross, and yet again he rose again for our benefit. And he puts up with us all the time, and he still saves souls, and he still goes after the lost sheep. And so, yeah, in that sense, there is the reckless love of God. Now, if you don't understand the context of the words of the song, if you don't define the word reckless in the context of this song and the lyrics of the song, then you'll go, no, that's not a good song, because it contradicts what we know about God. He's not reckless. He's responsible. He's wise. Reckless is a negative word, so you can never use it in connection with God, and so on and so forth. And that's what people do. Well, let's take a little bit of a clip from some of that video from the broadcaster Todd Friel that I had mentioned before, and then I want to talk a little bit about closing when I come back after we watch this video clip. So let's watch a clip of someone who says, no, this is not the proper song to be singing, this is not how God is, he's not reckless, and so on and so forth, without considering the context of the song. And then I'll come back and I'll say a few words of closing. So let's roll that clip.
No, I've got it written. Well, somewhere in my stack of things around here, where this reckless business, I've been giving it some thinking about, God's reckless love, and then people justify it. I don't think you can justify calling God's love reckless. More than that, I think it's dangerous. I've noted before that there's a number of new words that are being imported into Christianity. The scandalous love of God. Okay, they can justify that and say, well, no, what I mean by that is, kind of like a nuance of the word, or they find meaning number 17 at Merriam-Webster. Well, that's really what I was going for there. Here's the problem with not being precise in our descriptors for God's grace, love, or any of his attributes. It opens up the door to problems. So, for instance, let me say, I'm going to write a new song. It's about God's hot love. Joey, Tony, you got a problem with that? God's hot love?
Yes.
Oh, why? What's the problem? I don't understand.
The connotations of the word hot are very
that's biblical in the way you're thinking of them.
I meant that, that it's really fervent, and besides,
it's not what anyone else thinks.
It is a hot love that he has for us. Now, that's the defense of reckless love. Same thing. Here's the problem. If people start accepting God's hot love, is it a very far step to something really perverted in our thinking about God? Which, frankly, I think we actually do see in the NAR. If God is reckless, what kind of preaching can come out of that? I think there's a bit of an agenda to this, whether I don't think that some of these people are smart enough to figure out what they're doing, but I sure do believe that it provides for a launch pad. You get music into your brain, and it becomes a part of you, and then you can justify bad teaching based on bad theology set to music because it's a catchy tune. I think that stuff is far more dangerous, being reckless with our language. I think that author is reckless. He'd go, hey, are you calling me names? Exactly. Just look up the definition of reckless. It's doing it regardless of the consequences. Well, whatever. It's careless. That's not God's love. It's predetermined. It was settled beforehand. The major theme in Romans 1 through 8. That eternity before the world began, salvation was already declared, decreed, determined. really finished then, because when God says it, that's it. It's done. And he has determined to send out a general call that will be effectual on the people that he chooses to save. That's reckless. Not even close.
Could you call it an endless love?
Why not? Because it does last for eternity, don't you know? So we'll sing it as a duet in church.
So
and we'll
Lionel
actually
Richie?
set it to the same tune. Your endless love, my love. That's all I got. I can't remember the rest of it.
Yeah, let's just move on.
Your every breath that I take. It's got the word breathe. That's very hot these days. Your every step I take.
Now we're moving to the Police.
With the Police song. Yeah, sorry about that. Why not? You know, God's love is arresting, so why not sing a Police song? See what I did there? Well, look out for sloppy, reckless language. Our language and our worship should be precise.
Well, as you can see, Todd Friel tries to argue the case that this is not a good song for churches to sing, that this is not a good way to describe God. And I will grant you that if you're just going to throw that word out without any kind of context, if you're just going to go and throw around concepts like God is reckless and so on and so forth, then yeah, it's not appropriate. But if you have a context for it, and the word is defined within the song, and you do more than just look at the title of the song, but you actually read the words and the lyrics of the song, then it is appropriate to describe God in this way. Now, it's unusual. Granted, it's unusual. It isn't typical. This isn't the typical way that you would talk about God. But we've seen this before in contemporary music. And again, you have to look at the context of the words as they are being spoken. And I think there was another theologian, John Piper, that was asked the same question: is Reckless Love a proper and appropriate worship song for churches? And he argued that, yes, indeed, it is appropriate. We have different songs and hymns that, if you go through all of the traditional hymns that have been written over the last 100, 200 years, the classic hymns, you will find on occasion that a hymn doesn't use a word in its typical normal sense, and that you have to look into the hymn and find out what it's talking about, and that we are tolerant of that, that we do accept that.
And Tim gives us this specific example of a popular song right now called Reckless Love. But there are many such problems in many songs, both old and new, not just new. So let me take this one for an example as to how we might respond when this happens. So Reckless Love has a refrain which ends like this: "Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God." Now, I don't know enough about the theology of the author to know what aspect, what dimension of the meaning of reckless he intended. But I'm so aware that today there's a kind of theology that sees God as not knowing the future and therefore treating him as though he could take real risks since he doesn't know what might happen. In which case, the giving of his son might be described as reckless. You might give your son and salvation not succeed. I mean, there are a lot of people who believe this, who believe that God doesn't know the future exhaustively, and therefore he's taking real risk because he doesn't know what the outcome is going to be, at least not in the short run. So if reckless were to fit into that theology, I would regard it as heretical. Now, I hope the author did not intend it that way. In fact, it seems to me that there's good evidence in the song that he didn't mean it that way. But the reason the word reckless raises the question is because in modern English, you have to work really hard to put a positive meaning on the word reckless in relation to God. Because if you just click on a good thesaurus online and look at all the meanings associated with reckless, here they are. Audacious, brash, carefree, careless, daring, foolhardy, hasty, ill-advised, imprudent, negligent, thoughtless, adventurous, any which way, breakneck, daredevil, desperate, devil may care, fast and loose, feckless, harebrained, headlong, heedless, helter-skelter, hopeless, hot-headed, inattentive, incautious, inconsiderate, indiscreet, kooky, madcap, mindless, over-venturesome, playing with fire, precipitate, rash, regardless, temerarious, uncareful, venturesome, venturous, wild. Now, that is the general sense that one gets when one hears the word reckless driver, uncaring about what other people do or what he might do to other people. But maybe the author used the word reckless in the sense that God's love may look to an outsider foolish and ill-advised, brash, breakneck, but in fact the foolishness of God is wiser than the wisdom of men, and the recklessness of God is more assured of success than the most carefully executed plan of man. Maybe. In other words, maybe he's treating the word reckless the way Jesus treated the word hate when he said you have to hate your mother and father in order to follow me. Well, it looks like hate to a lot of people when you follow Jesus and leave your mother and father behind. So what should you do sitting in the congregation if you don't like this word reckless and you have all these negative connotations in your head? One of the things you do is look at the lyrics of the song to see if there are evidences of how the word might be construed or intended.
And it's the same way when you read poetry, like I mentioned before. If you see a word that is not in its normal definition but is defined by the context, then you can tolerate that. It's the same way with the reckless love song in churches that use it for praise and worship. It's got a nice melody, it's got a nice tune. It can be used to worship God with, as long as you understand what is being spoken about and are not too hypercritical of it. And so that is my conclusion, that yes, the song Reckless Love is acceptable to be sung in churches. It is an acceptable song. There's nothing wrong with it, as long as you understand how the word is being defined in this song. And as soon as you understand the lyrics, you read the lyrics, you sing the lyrics, you understand how it's being sung, what the point of the song is, and so on and so forth, then you go, okay, now I understand. Now I don't have as much of a problem, or I don't have a problem with it because I understand what the song is trying to say. And so as Christians, we have to learn how to be tolerant, and we have to learn how to be charitable in our understanding of things when other Christians say put out a song or write a poem or preach a sermon. You don't take the most negative definition or interpretation of a song or a sermon or a poem and apply that. You have to be as charitable as you can. And so when you apply the rule of charity to this song, Reckless Love, you will find that, yes, it's a good worship song. It's a good praise and worship song. Churches can use it. It's totally acceptable, and there's no problem. So I hope that's helpful, and we'll see you back next week on another edition of Christian Answers. God bless.